The most famous villain origin in comics might be completely fake. The Joker himself admits in The Killing Joke that if he must have a past, he prefers it multiple choice. Every time you think you've pinned him down, the story changes. And that's not an accident. That's the entire point. Today I'm breaking down every single major DC villain origin, from the deliberate chaos of the Joker to evolutionary freaks that shouldn't exist, starting with the clown who made uncertainty a superpower, the Joker. The Red Hood backstory first appeared in Detective Comics 168 in 1951. A lab worker turns to crime, gets chased by Batman, falls into a vat of chemicals, and emerges bleached white with a permanent grin. Simple, clean, horrifying. But it wasn't until Alan Moore's The Killing Joke in 1988 that it became the cultural monument it is today. Moore's version gives us a failed comedian crushed by poverty and the death of his pregnant wife, who reluctantly joins a heist as the Red Hood just to pay his bills. The chemicals change his face. Grief and desperation create the Joker. The vat just makes it visible. Here's the thing, the chemicals alter his appearance. His interpretation of what happened is what makes him the Joker. He looks at his ruined face and his dead wife and decides the only rational response is to become the punchline of a cosmic joke. It's a choice, even if he tells you it isn't. But here's where it gets weird. The Joker himself undercuts the whole story. He admits his memory is unreliable, that maybe he had a different past yesterday. Later stories like Three Jokers suggest multiple people may have become the Joker at different times, and The Dark Knight had him tell mutually incompatible scar stories to different people in the same film. The moment you think you understand him, he slips away. A villain who can't be pinned down can't be beaten by understanding him, which is honestly pretty tame compared to a man whose entire supervillainy runs on jealousy and a god complex. Lex Luthor. Most villains on this list have an accident, a chemical bath, a lab explosion, a curse that ruins their life in seconds. Lex Luthor has none of that. He becomes a villain through a long series of deliberate choices, proving that in the DC universe, human hubris alone is enough to be the world's greatest threat. Introduced in 1940 as a bald mad scientist, Lex was reimagined after Crisis on Infinite Earths into something far scarier, a billionaire corporate titan whose wealth makes him as untouchable as any god. No freak accident gave him power. He built it. He climbed his way to the top through ruthless intelligence, political manipulation, and zero ethical limits. And then he turned all of that against Superman. Here's the thing. Lex's hatred of Superman isn't personal in the petty sense. It's ideological. An alien, someone not one of us, commands unparalleled power and public adoration. And Lex frames his entire crusade as defending human self-determination from dependency on a godlike extraterrestrial. On paper, that argument isn't entirely irrational, which is what makes him compelling. Humanity placing all its faith in an invincible alien could be dangerous, but Lex's behavior consistently reveals the real motive is personal vanity and an inability to accept that someone else could be superior. The hero is the alien. The villain is the human. This structural flip is unique on this list and forces the question of whether Superman's goodness makes Lex's resentment understandable or simply exposes it as envy. And the answer, every single time, is envy. Lex doesn't want humanity to be free. He wants to be the one they look up to. Unlike the Joker, there's no pivotal night that breaks Lex. No chemical vat, no dramatic tragedy, just a man who keeps choosing to be the worst version of himself. Whether he's the corporate tycoon or the mad scientist depends on the era you're living in, but the constants never change. Human supremacy, hyperintelligence misapplied, and an ideological war against a benevolent god he refuses to trust. But if you think one man's ego is dangerous, wait until you meet the villain who was literally born into hell. Bane, a man sentenced to prison before he was even born. That's not hyperbole. Bane's father was a revolutionary who fled Santa Prisca to escape punishment, and the corrupt regime decided that since the father couldn't be caught, his unborn child would serve the life sentence instead. So Bane literally grows up inside Peña Duro, one of the most brutal prisons on the planet, surrounded by hardened criminals from infancy. And here's the thing, he doesn't just survive. He teaches himself to read, trains his body relentlessly, and by adulthood has murdered his first man and become the de facto ruler of the prison's internal hierarchy. Before any drugs, before any enhancements, just raw discipline and intelligence forged in hell. Then the biochemical shift arrives. Prison authorities select him as a test subject for Venom, a super steroid that has killed every previous candidate. They pump the experimental compound directly into his brain and spine. He survives, gains extraordinary strength, but the cost is permanent dependency administered through tubes connected to his central nervous system. The power is real, but it's also a leash. Having heard heard stories of Gotham from fellow inmates, Bane engineers the Arkham mass breakout in the Nightfall storyline, deliberately exhausting Batman by forcing him to recapture every major villain over weeks of sleepless nights. Then, when Batman is physically and mentally broken, Bane walks into the Batcave and snaps his spine over his knee. No gadgets, no plan B, just the unbreakable man, broken. The anti-Bruce Wayne parallel is almost too clean, both shaped by early violence, both forged into peak human beings through pure discipline. But Bruce inherits wealth and channels trauma into protecting others, while Bane inherits a prison sentence and channels pain into domination. He's one of the few villains who beats Batman by playing Batman's own game: preparation, intelligence, physical superiority. The difference is Bruce has moral hesitation. Bane has none. Bane marks the exact transition point in the origin spectrum, purely human suffering that crosses into biochemical enhancement, the hinge between the psychological and the scientific. At least, he chose to become what he is, unlike the next one on this list. Harley Quinn. This is the one that could actually happen. No chemicals, no alien tech, no ancient curse. Just a psychiatrist who thought she could help someone, and a patient who weaponized her empathy like a scalpel. Dr. Harleen Quinzel was qualified, competent, and academically accomplished when she arrived at Arkham Asylum. She specifically requested permission to treat the Joker because she believed she could study him, understand him, and ultimately cure him. That professional confidence is exactly what made her vulnerable. The Joker didn't break her in a day. He dismantled her over months. He presented himself as a misunderstood victim of a cruel world, deployed false vulnerability with surgical precision, and feigned intimacy until the boundaries between doctor and patient dissolved entirely. She fell in love with the man she was hired to cure, which is exactly what he engineered. Unlike every other villain on this list, her transformation required no vat, no lab accident, no radioactive spider. It was prolonged psychological grooming and the slow erosion of identity, which makes it the most realistic and disturbing origin in this entire video. Her fall is not about naivety. She holds a doctorate, she understands manipulation tactics and theory, but she underestimates her own vulnerability, overestimates her ability to control the Joker, and misreads his performed pain as genuine remorse. By the time she realizes what's happening, she's already rewritten her sense of self around him. She breaks him out of Arkham, adopts the name Harley Quinn, and reinvents herself as his acrobatic, chaotic partner in crime. Her entire identity is built around pleasing him, which is the entire problem. But here's where it gets complicated. Post-rebirth, Harley gradually recognizes the abuse and strikes out on her own, joining the Suicide Squad and operating as an anti-hero. She's the only villain on this list whose arc explicitly involves recovering a self that was stolen. The Batman mirror works differently here. Both Bruce and Harley construct new identities through costumes, codenames, and theatricality after trauma. But Bruce does it to fight crime, and Harley does it initially to please her abuser, then eventually to reclaim herself. Fan debates about her culpability are genuinely unresolved. Some argue she's a victim who was effectively brainwashed. Others point out she's an educated professional who knowingly violated ethics and participated in violent crimes long after understanding the Joker's nature. There's no clean answer, which is part of what makes her compelling. She's proof that you don't need cosmic intervention to destroy someone. You just need access and time. At least Harley eventually gets out. Mr. Freeze never does, because his tragedy is literally frozen in place forever. MSR Freeze. After 4 origins grounded in psychology, abuse, ideology, and human choice, we've hit the first one where a single laboratory accident is the literal point of no return. Victor Freeze didn't choose to become Mr. Freeze. He was made. And here's the thing nobody talks about. His definitive origin wasn't even created in the comics. It was written by Paul Dini for Batman, the animated series episode Heart of Ice in 1992. And it was so acclaimed that DC later imported it wholesale into mainstream comic continuity. A cartoon episode so good it became canon. Victor is a brilliant cryogenicist whose wife Nora is terminally ill. Desperate to save her, he secretly uses corporate lab resources to place her in cryogenic suspension, hoping to find a cure. When his employer orders the project shut down, a confrontation leads to an accident exposing Victor to experimental cryogenic chemicals. The explosion permanently alters his physiology, so his body can no longer survive outside sub-zero temperatures. He must live inside a refrigerated suit at all times. Presumed dead, he returns to take revenge on everyone who destroyed his chance to save Nora. The physical freezing is inseparable from the emotional freezing. Victor shuts himself off from all feeling to survive the pain of her loss, even as everything he does is driven by his inability to let her go. Love and numbness occupying the exact same body. The suit keeps him alive. The mission keeps him functional. Neither one lets him heal. Then DC decided to mess with it. A New 52 retcon revealed that Nora was never actually Victor's wife. She was a woman from the 1940s whose cryogenically preserved body he became obsessed with, reframing his entire tragedy as a delusion. Fans largely rejected this as cheapening one of DC's most emotionally powerful origin stories. Add that to the list of unnecessary retcons nobody asked for. The Batman mirror is precise. Both men lose loved ones and channel that loss into obsessive, highly technical missions. But where Bruce builds connections over time, Victor's world collapses into a single fixed point. He freezes in place, literally and metaphorically, while Bruce keeps moving forward. Mr. Freeze is the clearest answer to what Bruce Wayne might have become if grief had consumed him entirely, instead of fueling something larger. At least Victor's obsession was rooted in love. But if you think freezing your wife to cheat death is morally complicated, wait until you hear about the man who turned his father's death into a blood vendetta involving advanced military technology and a bug-eyed helmet, Black Manta. Aquaman technically made the right call, and it destroyed him. Here's what happened. In the DCEU film Aquaman, David and his father are pirates hijacking a submarine. Aquaman shows up, stops them, and during the fight, an explosion traps David's father underwater. David begs Aquaman to save him. Aquaman refuses. His exact reasoning: these men killed innocents, and they need to face the consequences of their actions. He leaves them both behind to die. David's father, knowing he won't survive, tells his son to live and seek revenge. Then he kills himself with his own explosive to free David from the wreckage. That's the origin. A hero making a morally defensible choice that directly creates his most personal enemy. Black Manta debuted in Aquaman number 35 in September 1967 and became Aquaman's arch enemy almost immediately. Bug-eyed helmet, black wetsuit, advanced weapons, Zero Chill. His civilian identity and backstory have shifted across continuities, but the core motivation stays the same. He hates Aquaman on a deeply personal level. Some comic origins depict him as a child kidnapped and abused aboard a ship, calling out for help as Aquaman swam nearby and was ignored. That version frames the vendetta as abandonment rather than villainy. The DCEU version is cleaner and more brutal, because Aquaman isn't ignoring a random kid. He's making a conscious moral judgment that pirates who murder people don't deserve rescue, and that judgment becomes the fuel for one of DC's most relentless vendettas. The structural mirror here is sharp. Aquaman is half human, half Atlantean, torn between two worlds, with innate mystical power rooted in royal lineage. Black Manta is fully human, obsessed with sea-based warfare, and every advantage he has is built through technology, training, and tactical cunning. He forces his way into a world that was never his, because the king of that world let his father die. In the comics, Manta's vendetta escalates to the killing of Aquaman's infant son. That's not a power play or a world domination scheme. That's revenge so personal it rewrites the entire relationship between hero and villain into something Aquaman can never emotionally escape. Black Manta's story also carries ongoing thematic weight as one of DC's prominent black villains, with some storylines engaging racial and social dimensions, including experiences of oppression that inform his resentment of Atlantis. These threads are unevenly explored across different eras, but when they're present, they add another layer to the vendetta, because it's not just about one man's grief, it's about systemic exclusion, about being denied access to power and then watching someone with inherited authority decide your father isn't worth saving. Aquaman wasn't wrong, but if you think moral righteousness protects you from consequences, wait until you meet the woman who made a deal with a god and got cursed for her trouble. Cheetah. Several people have worn the Cheetah name over the decades, but there's really only one version anyone talks about. Barbara Ann Minerva, introduced in Wonder Woman Volume 7 back in August 1987. Before everything went wrong, Barbara was a brilliant British archaeologist, an heiress, and someone genuinely obsessed with ancient mythology and lost civilizations. Her academic credentials were solid. Her adventurous streak could have made her Wonder Woman's ally in another story, but she was defined by loneliness, a sense of exclusion from the divine connections she spent her life studying, and a hunger for transcendence that made her vulnerable to a very specific temptation. The transformation centers on a ritual involving a plant god called Urz-Kartaga. Barbara expected to become a powerful immortal guardian, the kind of figure she'd read about in all those ancient texts. Instead, because the sacrifice sacrifice wasn't performed under the correct conditions, the ceremony produced a curse rather than a blessing. The ritual granted her superhuman strength, agility, razor-sharp claws, durability, and in some versions, a venomous bite capable of transforming others into similar creatures. But the cost was constant physical pain, insatiable hunger, and a psychological destabilization that amplified every resentment she'd ever had. Here's where it gets dark. Her only partial relief from the suffering comes when she surrenders to the bloodlust. Violence becomes both the symptom and the only temporary treatment, trapping her in a predatory identity she never intended to inhabit. She wanted to be chosen by the gods. Instead, she became a tool for one. The DC Rebirth run deepened the tragedy by reframing Barbara as someone who had a genuine friendship with Diana before the curse, a brilliant peer who helped bring Diana into the modern world. Now every battle between them is a confrontation with a person Diana once cared for, and Barbara's rage is as much about betrayal and feeling unchosen by the gods as it is about raw power. Diana's abilities are innate, granted through a coherent system of duty and love, and she uses them to protect others. Barbara acquired hers through a desperate, individualistic pact that severed her from community and bound her to a capricious god who was using her as a tool all along. Barbara's origin functions as a critique of extractive approaches to sacred knowledge, an outsider archaeologist who seeks to appropriate mystical power from an ancient source is consumed rather than enlightened, with her expertise becoming the very thing that led her to a ritual she was never meant to survive. The transformation was voluntary. The outcome was not. But if you think being cursed by a god is disturbing, wait until you hear about the telepathic gorilla who decided humanity was beneath him. Gorilla Grodd. After 7 human-adjacent origins, we now arrive at a telepathic gorilla with psychic powers who wants to enslave humanity. And yes, I know how that sounds, but Grodd is legitimately one of the most terrifying villains in DC's entire roster, and his origin is categorically different from everyone else on this list because it has almost nothing to do with human tragedy, human choices, or human mistakes. Created by John Broome and Carmine Infantino, Grodd first appeared in The Flash, Number 106 in 1959. An alien spaceship crashes near a gorilla community in Africa. The strange energies it emits uplift the entire group into sapient beings with advanced intelligence and psychic powers. Grodd emerges as the most powerful and ambitious among them, possessing telepathy, telekinesis, and physical strength far beyond an ordinary gorilla. Nobody chose this. Nobody caused it. It just happened. His psionic abilities define his identity as a villain. He can control minds, project mental force beams, and in later stories absorb intelligence by consuming human brains. Read that again. He gains knowledge by eating your brain. That means Grodd combines brute physical dominance with invisible psychic warfare simultaneously, which is a nightmare combination that very few heroes can counter effectively. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Gorilla City, the hidden advanced civilization where Grodd originates, is crucial context. His peers chose peace and isolation. They built a utopia. Grodd is not representative of his species. He is the exception, not the rule. That makes him more frightening because it means his evil is a choice within a society that chose otherwise. The same cosmic accident that gave his people enlightenment gave him megalomania. He didn't fall into chemicals. He didn't lose a loved one. He wasn't experimented on. The universe simply handed him power, and he chose domination. The Flash mirror is the cleanest one in this entire video. Barry Allen uses speed in defense of others. Grodd uses mental power not to expand possibilities, but to constrict them, overriding free will and imposing his consciousness onto others. Speed is liberation versus telepathy as enslavement. That's the whole fight. Taken together, all 8 of these origins reveal the same underlying truth. DC's greatest villains are not people who were born wrong. They were broken, betrayed, manipulated, cursed, or uplifted by a universe that doesn't hand out justice equally. The heroes get the same universe and make different choices. That's the whole game. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now